Hey, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, then hi, my name is Erica, and today I'm going to talk about disability and sexuality. So, a few weeks back, actually, probably a month ago at this point, it's been quite some time, I did a presentation about disability and sexuality, and I wanted to do something similar on here. It's not going to be the exact presentation because I try to make my channel less academic and more human, I guess. And also, because of the constraints of time, I wasn't able to cover everything I wanted to cover. Sorry, I was just looking at my door and was like, I would like to get a poster on the door that says, "You have now entered the Twilight Zone," because I love that show. Anyway, why am I talking about that? I don't know. But, so, why am I talking about disability and sexuality? Disabled people tend to be desexualized by society. Sometimes if people are living in congregate living settings such as nursing homes, other types of institutions, group homes, they may be barred from expressing their sexuality. They may be stopped from seeing a person they want to see. They may be told that they're incapable of consent. But also they may be sexually assaulted. They may struggle with sexual abuse. Their sexual identity may be it may be dismissed and invalidated if they're part of the LGBTQIA plus community. And I think that's why this is worth talking about. So sexuality is more than just the physical act of sex. According to the Better Health channel, it's a website for the Victoria government, which I believe is in Australia, although don't quote me on that. Well, according to the Better Health channel, sexuality is not about who you have sex with or how often you have it. Sexuality is about your sexual feelings, thoughts, attractions, and behaviors towards other people, and I would go on to say even towards yourself. You can find other people physically, sexually, or emotionally attractive, and all of those things are part of your sexuality. So I'm not just talking about sex. And I want to make that clear because I feel like whenever I talk about a topic like this, they're like, wow, are you like obsessed with sex? No, I'm really not. Sexuality is a part of our humanity, even asexuality. I do want to mention that because I don't want to further marginalize people that are asexual and disabled, because those people do exist. So now I'm going to go into a bit of, sorry, I need to read this, a bit of the barriers that a lot of disabled people face in accessing and expressing their sexuality. So, like I said earlier, disabled people are often desexualized by society, and this can take a few different forms. Disabled people are often thought of childlike or innocent, perpetual children that need to be shielded from discussions about sexuality and sexual feelings and all of that. But also, some disabled people are viewed as deviant for having typical sexual desires and behaviors. For some reason, we see this a lot. This stereotype is often applied to little people or people with dwarfism. I don't know why that's a major stereotype that tends to be attached to little people, and that stereotype needs to die because it's harmful. But that is a stereotype, and that's why I'm talking about it today. Disabled people are also seen as unattractive or undesirable. If you've seen my channel before, you know I talk a lot about disability in the media. When you think of rom-coms, even porn, you probably don't think of disabled people. And that's because we're not portrayed as attractive. We're not portrayed as sexy because we're not believed to be attractive. We're believed to be sexy. So then if society by and large finds us unattractive, undesirable, and unsexy, that's going to be a barrier towards having a healthy sexuality. And then there's also the belief that talking about sexuality puts people at risk or directly leads to them having sex. We see this a lot. A lot of parents of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities will be like, oh yeah, my child doesn't need sex ed. We don't need to be putting ideas in their heads. I'm not a parent, so maybe I don't understand this, but I am a human being, and I do realize talking about sex is not going to make people have sex. And if it does, they're already thinking about sex. They already want to have sex. You're just helping them. Like, I don't know. Maybe I didn't explain that right. Who knows? So, now I'm going to go into some of the other barriers, which are a little less attitudinal and more of like actual, not necessarily physical barriers. I mean, some of these are physical barriers, but more of like rules and regulations and just things set in place that present as barriers for people achieving a healthy sexuality. So some of these barriers include lack of privacy. Like I mentioned earlier, people that live in congregate living settings like group homes and nursing homes may not have privacy because direct support professionals who work to support them in their daily life, they work at their home. So that would lead to them not having a lot of privacy, not having a lot of space to do what they want and obviously in our society, sex is typically thought of as a private act, and anything to do with sex and sexuality is seen as largely private. So if they can't have privacy, it's really hard to have a healthy sex life, to even have romantic relationships. There's also archaic and overprotective rules. A lot of group homes and nursing homes and institutional settings won't let people live together if they're dating or... Sorry, I was reading the weather alert. Temperatures are to drop on Saturday. We don't know that yet. Stop it, Erica. So there are archaic and overprotective rules, like you can't live with your significant other, or maybe you're not allowed to have sex. There's also guardianship. Somebody's guardian may be able to block them from seeing their significant other or block them from having sex. Also, there are things like physical limitations. If somebody has a significant physical disability that prevents them from engaging in any type of sexual activity without assistance, and if they don't have assistance, then what are they going to do? Probably not be able to engage in that because nobody's there to help them. Also, there's lack of accessible sex ed. A lot of people in the special education system do not receive sexual education, and when they do, oftentimes it's not presented to them in a way that they can comprehend and that makes sense to them, in which case it's kind of useless to teach somebody something in a way they can't understand. Things have to be presented in a way that the individual can understand in order for it to actually mean anything. And also, in this country, which I don't mean to get political, although everything is political in this world, but we have marriage penalties. A lot of people that rely on government support to live their lives in the way that they choose, if they get married, they may lose that support. So if you're on, say for example, you need a personal care attendant, and a lot of people who need personal care attendants are on Medicaid, because in case you don't know, personal care attendants are very expensive and most private insurances do not cover that, which is a big issue, and I could go on and on about that, but I won't, because that's not what the main crux of this video is about. But so if somebody needs Medicaid in order to have their needs met, in order for them to be able to get dressed and to shower and maybe get ready for bed, some people may need help even going to the bathroom, eating food prep, basically any task of daily living somebody may need support with. And if they cannot afford that support without Medicaid, and their Medicaid is taken away because now they're in a different income bracket because they're now married, then they're stranded. I was gonna say something else, but I am planning to share this video, wonderful documentary on Hulu called Patrice the movie. It has not gotten enough, and it is just about her fighting against a system that's really against disabled people living their lives and being happy. She fights for marriage equality via an end to marriage penalties. She also deals with transportation issues. She deals with a lot, and at times it can be hard to watch as a disabled person who faces a lot of similar barriers, and also somebody who works with disabled people who face similar barriers. It's hard to see these things day in and day out, see people struggling to have their basic needs met. But that's why it's a good movie, because I feel like a lot of people are unaware. When I tell people I'll likely never be able to get married, they're like, what do you mean? I thought marriage equality was fixed. I thought, and now anybody can get married, and it's like, not so fast. Not real. I wish that were the case, but it is not. So anyway, I'm just plugging that movie. I have nothing to do with that movie. I did not make that movie. I don't know anybody who did make that movie, but it's a good movie. So I have no real reason, I have no stake in the game to get you to watch the movie, besides the fact that I really think it's good on multiple levels. Anyway, moving on. Now I'm going to go into a bit of the consequences of disabled people being blocked from expressing and accessing their sexuality. So some of these consequences can include an increased risk of abuse and sexual assault. Definitely gonna get demonetized in this video because I say sexual assault a lot, and I also just say sexual a lot. Oh well. Also, poor body image is another consequence. Inappropriate sexual behaviors at inappropriate times or in inappropriate settings, and unsafe sex practices, which can lead to a risk of sexually transmitted infections and unplanned pregnancies. Okay, sorry, I'm just clicking this thing. It's much easier when somebody else clicks these slides for you, because if not, my eyesight's not the best and it's hard to see. So, don't laugh, Erica. This is the serious segment of the video. Okay, so sexual assault. There are many different statistics surrounding sexual assault and disability. So there's not one statistic I can point to, but one that I found alarming is that up to 83% of disabled women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. And while I tend to not think statistics are really helpful in allowing people to understand the scope of an issue, I think we can all admit 83% is an unacceptable number of disabled women that are sexually assaulted in their lifetime. It's a very disturbing statistic, in my opinion, and I think it should be disturbing to everybody else, especially since I feel like disabled people are often left out of the Me Too movement. And I do want to be clear here that Tarana Burke, the woman that founded the Me Too movement, she's very intersectional. She includes disabled people, and obviously she's a Black woman, so it's a movement led by Black women. She includes trans people and other people that are parts of the LGBTQIA plus community. But when the Me Too movement was co-opted by white women in Hollywood, it really centered white women in Hollywood, and so that ended up marginalizing the very people that were supposed to be uplifted by the Me Too movement. But please know, I am not criticizing Tarana Burke or the actual origins of the Me Too movement, but I will always criticize people like Alyssa Milano and Rose, whatever her name is. See, I don't even know her name because she's not important. Okay, moving on from that. Also, according to the Safe Alliance, disabled men are 4 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than their non-disabled counterparts. And it's very important to talk about the issues that disabled men face, because I do feel like in our society, even though sexual assault in and of itself is very hush-hush, it's something seen as shameful and people are often victim blamed, but I feel like this happens a lot more to men. Men feel like sexual assault is a women's issue, so if they have experienced it, they may be afraid to come forward because it makes them feel emasculated. And oh gosh, my door made a noise and I startled. But that's why we need to talk about it, so that men do not feel that way, and that men can feel supported when they do unfortunately face these issues. So, aside from sexual assault, disabled people are also more likely to experience domestic violence and abuse than their non-disabled peers. But this abuse can look different at times, and it's really important to note these differences, because if you don't know what to look for, you may miss the signs of abuse when it's happening right in front of you. Some of the different ways that disabled people may experience domestic abuse and violence are their medications or medical interventions being withheld. They may be restricted access to their assistive devices. One of the books I read that I've talked about in the video where I talk about a bunch of disability books is Nadina Spina's memoir, Such a Pretty Girl, and in it she shares a story. For context, this is going to be a long-winded explanation, but I feel like I need to go into the context. So Nadina Spina had polio as a child, so she became a paraplegic. And then later in life, she decided to have both of her legs amputated because she was having a lot of issues with her legs. So after that, she had met this man who took a real liking to her. And she was a double amputee, and she had prosthetic legs. So she had a one-night stand with this. I'm sorry, my roommate's dog is barking. Grizzly, it's okay, bud. But so she had a one-night stand with this guy that she barely knew, which obviously, if you're having a one-night stand, you don't really tend to know somebody that well. But after they were done with sex, he withheld her prosthetic legs so she could not leave his apartment. That's terrifying. Really, really terrifying. And I share that story to illustrate why it's so dangerous when somebody may take somebody's assistive devices away from them. People may also, if somebody's significant other is also their caregiver, and the caregiver may refuse to assist with daily living tasks such as eating, showering, using the bathroom, and dressing, which obviously if somebody restricts that, you're gonna be really struggling. Hey, Grizzly, it's okay, bud. Hey. I'm sorry, my roommate, when she leaves the dog, it's very upset. And also, a lot of times we see things like verbal abuse related to one's disability. I'm probably sharing this video with people I work with, so I don't really want to go into this, but when I was in college, I did date somebody that basically told me nobody else would want to date me because of my disability, and there were a lot of other issues in this relationship, but it was very hard to hear what I've told myself my entire life coming from somebody else, somebody who's supposed to care about you and uplift you instead of putting you down. Next, moving on. Another thing that I can really talk about is, oh, hey, Grizzly, it's okay, bud, is poor body image. So being desexualized can affect the way one sees oneself, because people often internalize society's perceptions, and if you're constantly being told you're defective or you're unattractive or you're not sexy, you may start to believe that. And that's something I have always struggled with in my life, and it's something I work on every day, is not internalizing the messages I am told about disability or about womanhood or bisexuality or any aspect of my identity that's marginalized. And many disabled people can never fit stereotypical gender roles. And that can lead to shame. A lot of disabled women are not able to do things like be a homemaker, cooking and cleaning, although I don't want to do any of that. Hey, Grizzly, I am thirsty. I swear, the second I turn, I swear all I have to do for that dog is poke my head out my door, and then he stops barking, but he's probably gonna start up again in a little bit, so I'm gonna try to get through this as quickly as I can. But a lot of disabled women cannot be like a homemaker, and although I really don't want to be that, I do consider myself a feminist, and plus, who wants to spend their whole life just like slaving over a man, basically? Not me, that's for sure. But it still does lead to shame, because it feels like you can never live up to this impossible standard set for you. And a similar thing happens with disabled men who may not be able to be physically strong or independent, which I can go on and on about that, but so, and they feel like that can affect the way they perceive their body or the way they see themselves in general. Even non-binary disabled people may feel like they're not non-binary enough, or they may not feel like their identity is validated, which can in turn affect their body image. And this can contribute to the development of eating disorders and other mental health issues. And of course, this is where I give my little disclaimer that I don't think we can ever say one thing causes eating disorders. If you've seen my channel or you've read my blog, you probably know I have struggled with an eating disorder since I was in middle school. And one of my biggest pet peeves is when people say things like, social media causes eating disorders, or this causes eating disorders, or that causes eating disorders. Eating disorders are very complex mental illnesses, and I think trying to pinpoint a cause kind of trivializes them, and we don't want that. In order to destigmatize eating disorders, and also to make treatment better, and to make just everybody more informed and understanding of eating disorders, we need to realize that they're complex and there's not one cause. Like, no, Instagram did not make me sick. A lot of things made me sick, including genetics and brain chemistry, all that. This is not a video about that though, so we're moving on now. Next, a lot of times when somebody doesn't have a healthy outlet for their sexuality, they may exhibit inappropriate sexual behaviors at inappropriate times and in inappropriate places. So, like I was talking about before, people that live in congregate living settings, a lot of times their public and private lives are converged. The boundaries between what is public and what is private get very blurred because, again, somebody's workplace is your home, and people are always coming in and out of your home, and your home is not just your home, but Grizzly. So if a person is restricted from expressing and exploring their sexuality altogether, they may engage in behaviors that are harmful, such as touching someone without consent, masturbating in public places or in private places that have become public, such as group homes or nursing homes. They may grope people or make unwanted sexual advances. So, and when they exhibit these behaviors, they're likely to be punished or to face consequences, which, while I do understand actions have consequences, I also think it's really important to note that when somebody is blocked from expressing a certain part of themselves, it's gonna come out in some way or another, which is why I am making this video and why I think talking about sexuality and disability is more than just, oh, this disabled girl just wants to talk about sex all the time. No, it's not that. This is a real problem that affects real people. So yeah. And now I'm going to talk about some other factors. Disabled people we're not excluded from the whole heterosexuality, which we're often presumed to be heterosexual or straight and cisgender. And that further marginalizes disabled people that are part of the LGBTQIA2S community. And I can definitely relate to this. I am a bisexual woman, and for pretty much up until my early to mid 20s, I didn't really talk about my sexuality because I was like, well, I can just date men and pretend this side of me doesn't exist and I don't have these feelings. Because I was like, well, I'm already disabled. Do I really want to be this too? But at the same time, I don't have a choice. I am who I am. I have the feelings I have. And in denying that, I was denying a part of myself. And when a disabled person is LGBTQIA2S, their identity may be framed as something to be fixed. And if they rely on direct support professionals, those professionals may project their values and beliefs onto the person they're supporting. So if that person's homophobic, someone may not be able to be themselves and express their sexuality in a way that feels right to them. We also have Grizzly. 1 second. I swear I've spent more time telling a dog, you are not alone. People are in this house. You're safe. We have not abandoned you, than I have recording this actual video. But we're going to get back on track now. we also have things like forced contraceptives, which I have a whole segment on that, and I could also have a whole video on that if it is something people are interested in. It's something I'm very interested in. Also, disabled people that become parents may have their children taken away for no other reason than their disability, and they're seen as unfit to have a child. So, like Grizzly, so, one sec. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, I'm gonna go into forced sterilization now. So I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the famous, I'm out of breath now from getting up and telling the dog you're okay. But you may have heard of the infamous Supreme Court case Buck v. Bell, in which a young woman named Carrie Buck, who was a poor white woman from Virginia, was deemed feeble-minded. Not my words, the words that they used to describe her. And she had a child out of wedlock that was actually the result of rape. And in 1927, she was forcibly sterilized for being promiscuous. And it was also in order to prevent her from spreading her defective genes. And people often, when they talk about this, so a lot of people in talking about this, they speculate that Carrie Buck did not have any type of disability, and that she was just poor and from a poor family and not educated. But I would like to argue, and I think we should all like to argue, that it shouldn't matter if she was disabled or not, because nobody deserves to have their bodily autonomy stripped from them in that way. That is violent. The idea that she was forced to undergo this life-altering surgery against her will. And a lot of people don't realize that Carrie Buck had a sister named Horace Higgins, and she was also forcibly sterilized. But the difference is Horace did not know she was forcibly sterilized. She was told she had an appendectomy, and it wasn't until she was trying to have children and she was coming up against infertility that she realized she was forcibly sterilized. And about this, Horace said, in guinea pigs, just taking us and butchering us up like hogs. And I very much agree with that. That these people were not treated like people. Disabled women were not treated like people. They were treated like objects. And forced sterilization is unfortunately not just something relegated to the past. It's something still happening in our society, not only like in prisons and stuff like that, which is its own issue, and I could talk about that too. But we have something that is colloquially, no, I hate that word. It's hard to say. I love that word, but I hate it because it's really hard for me to say. But anyway, people, I guess Grizzly doesn't like the word colloquially either. But anyway, people often refer to this as the Ashley treatment. And I actually have a whole video on the Ashley treatment. And it's named after a young woman who's actually my age, who actually has my disabilities, cerebral palsy, along with some intellectual disabilities. She's often referred to as Ashley X, but her parents wrote this blog about her, which I have lots of thoughts on that. A lot, actually, and I do go into that in that video. So if you want to watch that and hear more about this, then please watch that video, even though it's a few years old. And yeah, but so her parents wrote his blog, and she received this thing known as growth attenuation, which is basically just stopping somebody's growth before they're fully grown. Before they're fully grown. Why did I say groaned? I'm tired. But anyway, so Ashley underwent this controversial surgery and treatment plan to stop the growth of her, and a lot of other people with intellectual and physical disabilities also undergo this. And this treatment entailed a hysterectomy, having her breast buds removed, and also estrogen treatments. And her parents argued they did this so that Ashley would never have to suffer through a menstrual cycle, because apparently that is unbearable. I mean, to be fair, it can be unbearable for a lot of people. A lot of people that have like endometriosis and polycystic ovarian polycystic. Anyway, people that have different reproductive issues may really have painful and unbearable periods, and yeah. But the thing is, like, taking away somebody's period just because, oh, she may experience a lot of pain, and taking out somebody's organs, having invasive surgery for that, and undergoing hormone therapy for the rest of your life. And I want to be clear here, I'm not saying people shouldn't ever undergo hormone treatments, because a lot of trans people and non-binary people, that's very gender affirming for them. And I will never argue against that. I want people to be able to make their own choices about their bodies. And that is my main problem with this treatment is it's not with the person's consent. And also, I don't believe it's with the person's best interest in mind, because often the parents do this to make their kid lighter and easier to carry and to care for, and also because, and this is my theory, this is not a fact, but I believe it's because a lot of the parents are uncomfortable with the idea that their child is now a woman or a man. So instead of dealing with that discomfort, they stop their child from becoming a woman or a man, and they are perpetual children. I also want to add here that I don't think this is in Ashley's best interest, because estrogen is also often linked to blood clots, and you know what is also linked to increased risk of blood clots is immobility. And Ashley uses a wheelchair full time. She's not really able to use her arms much, so that paired with the estrogen treatments is a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. So, I've talked a lot in this video about things, but not sex. And this is a video on sexuality and disability. So what about sex? Well, let's talk about sex. I'm not gonna lie, I really wanted to say that in this video. That's kind of why I segued in this way. But, so many disabled people have difficulty finding sexual partners or having access to sexual activities, which I've mentioned earlier in this video. So I have talked about sex, actually. Don't know why I acted like I didn't. But there are also these people that call themselves devotees, and they're disability fetishists that can put disabled people at risk. And one thing, I watched a documentary, it might have been a Vice documentary or a BBC, I don't remember. Anyway, I will link it down below. It's a very disturbing but interesting watch. And some of the devotees said that they are turned on by struggle, which scares me. I'm always scared. I'm always like, if I'm online dating, should I put my disability in my profile? Or am I putting myself at risk of people turned on by struggle because they perceive me as struggling? That really does scare me, actually. Moving on from my existential fears. But disabled people still can and deserve to have healthy sex lives if that is something they choose. And if they don't want that, then they don't need to have it either. They may need assistance, but they should be able to live their lives as they choose without fear of judgment. Something I find very interesting is something known as sexual surrogacy, and it is when often a disabled person, but sometimes it's not a disabled person, anybody can get these services. But sexual surrogacy is when a person has sex with somebody who is like a professional in this area, and it is to help them learn how to have sex, but also to help them experience sex and discover what they like and what they can and cannot do. And there's a movie about this that I have a lot of mixed feelings about, actually. I could actually do a whole video on that. If you want that, comment down below. Please do a video on that movie. But it is called the Sessions, and it's based on the true story of a man named Mark O'Brien who had polio, and he didn't want to die a virgin, which a lot of people don't want to die a virgin. But he felt like nobody was gonna have sex with him, so he had a sex surrogate. And he actually ends up catching feelings for her, as the kids say. I don't know if the kids still say that. Back in my day, we said catching feelings. But anyway, he ended up falling for her, and that was the one thing she said: don't fall for me. I'm working in an official capacity. I'm not actually in love with you. But he fell for her, and I had a lot of feelings about that. But I did find that interesting because it is a way for disabled people who may feel like they can't have sex otherwise to have sex. But I do also think it is important that disabled people build real, meaningful relationships and can also experience sex organically without having to get like a professional to help them experience that. But I don't think it should be outlawed because it's people's choices. So I was gonna go into a bit about interabled relationships. I don't think I need to. I've done a video on how I feel that interabled relationships are good. Period, they're good. But I will say, I feel like we've gotten to a point in society where interabled relationships have almost become like leveling up for disabled people, if that makes sense. Like, disabled people say stuff like, oh, well, look at me, I got this non-disabled person to like me, when I will always say, you should date somebody for who they are, not because they make you look better or enhance your social status. And in doing that, you're being ableist and basically saying, I'm disabled, but I'm better now because a non-disabled person likes me, and obviously non-disabled people are inherently better than disabled people, which is untrue. And we need to have these conversations so that we can untangle this web of ableism and say, hey, disabled people are worthy, period. Not because of their proximity to a non-disabled person, not because non-disabled people like them, not because they look less disabled or they act less disabled, but they are inherently valuable because they are people. Okay, so what can we do? Well, first of all, we have to stop viewing the sexuality of disabled people as an issue. And we also need to engage in conversations about sex and sexuality, both broadly, but also specific to disability. We also want to educate direct support professionals on how just because you're a direct support professional does not mean you get to violate somebody's rights. If somebody wants to have sex, they should be allowed to have sex. And I know that's controversial, but oh well. And we also need to provide sex education to disabled students. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are people already engaging in this work, and we should uplift them instead of trying to always recreate something. And that was a long video. But thank you so much for watching. I do have a plan to make a video about disability and catcalling, which interests me a lot. I was gonna add it into this video, but this video is way too long already. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this. If you've learned something or enjoyed it, I don't know if I would say enjoyed it, but please give it a big thumbs up. And if you have not already and you would like to see more of my content, please consider hitting that subscribe button down below.